on budget management.
It being 2 p.m, we will now move to questions. Senator Keneally.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Senior Australians and Aged Care Services, Senator Colbeck. An aged care manager in Victoria who has been forced to work 80-hour weeks due to staff shortages has said, and I quote, "During our recent outbreak, I requested isolation gowns and N95 masks from the national stockpile. Instead, we received latex gloves and hand sanitizer. I laughed, then I went into my office and cried. It's like a bad joke." More than 2 years into this pandemic, why is the Morrison-Joyce government still failing aged care workers?
The Minister for Aged Care Services, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I don't accept the premise of Senator Keneally's questions. And as I indicated to the chamber yesterday, we have acknowledged that there were some issues with supplies out of the national stockpile. That's one of the things that we've been working on. Coles, Woolworths, a whole range of organisations indicated that they had supply chain issues because they had workforce out of their logistics chains, and that impacted on their capacity to deliver. Mr. President, I'm advised that in respect of this facility, this particular facility, the size and the scale of the delivery, and this happened with a number of facilities, Mr. President, that the size and the scale of the delivery meant that the deliveries were split into a number of different packages, into a number of different deliveries. So things different. So things would have arrived at different times because of those issues we had with the logistics chain, Mr. President. The government has acknowledged that we had issues with deliveries out of the national stockpile. That's what we have spent all of January working on to fix, because the logistics operators that were supplying and moving the products, Mr. President, had staff effects from COVID. That's why it happened, Mr. President, like so many other logistics chains around the country. For the Labor Party to expect that one part of the economy, one part of the community won't be impacted by COVID when the rest is just completely naive, Mr. President, and it shows how much they're prepared to play politics with the pandemic rather than actually deal with the pandemic. They're not interested in finding solutions. They're not interested in actually dealing with the issues that are real, and they are real for that provider who's made comment to the local media. We're interested in dealing with the problems, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Senator Keneally, a supplementary question.
Thank you. A nursing manager in New South Wales said, and I quote, "I have never felt pressure like this. The reality is the government has made a huge amount of mistakes. My staff should not be on the pittance they are being paid. I don't think anyone in aged care is okay." Will the minister say sorry to this nursing manager for the mistakes he and his government have made?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first thing we'll do is acknowledge again the magnificent work that aged care providers and their workforce have done during COVID, Mr. President. We know that they've doubled up on shifts. We know that they've worked really hard in the interests of the residents that they're caring for. We understand that, Mr. President, and we've supported the aged care sector with PPE, with rapid antigen tests, with surge workforce, Mr. President, with a program to cover the costs, the additional costs of managing a COVID-19 outbreak within a facility. There have been a whole range of measures that have been in place right through the pandemic, Mr. President, and at certain points of time during the pandemic, there have been circumstances that have arisen that have impacted on the capacity to appropriately deliver those services, Mr. President. And I've just been through the point of telling the chamber about the issues we've had with supply chains, Mr. President.
Your time has expired. Senator Keneally, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Aged care nurse Sue has asked, and I quote, "Mr. Morrison, do I go to Mr. Smith, who is in pain, or Mrs. Jones, who's on the floor, or John, who has behaviour problems and is intruding into other people's rooms? I have floor alarms going and buzzers going. What would you like me to do?" What does the Minister for Aged Care Services think Sue should do?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, the question is an example of how cheap the Labor Party are really trying to be in relation to the delivery of aged care services, Mr. President. And it's impossible. It's impossible for me to understand. It is impossible for me to try from the question and interpret the decisions that Sue has had to make, Mr. President. But I acknowledge how difficult they are. But I acknowledge how difficult they are, Mr. President. And we have provided over 80,000 shifts of surge workforce around the country, Mr. President, and we have provided additional resources wherever we can. We have not spared any expense with respect to supporting the sector with those workforces. I know, Mr. President, I know that the choices that Sue has had to make are going to be difficult. And they are the stresses that all Australians have felt through the healthcare system, through the aged care system, through NDIS, some very, very difficult, through a whole range of workplaces in managing COVID-19.
Has expired. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Deputy Prime Minister, Senator Mackenzie. Can the minister outline to the Senate how the Liberal and National government's plan is delivering investment, jobs and opportunities for regional Australia?
The Minister representing the Deputy Prime Minister, Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Canavan, for your long advocacy for regional Australia. Well, our government has been just focusing on getting it done to ensure our regions are sustainable, prosperous and secure by investing and delivering thousands of projects on the ground and delivering local jobs. Projects that build on the natural competitive advantage of our regions and supporting them to be more resilient in the face of key challenges, whether it's drought, whether it's bushfire or whether it's indeed COVID-19, and it is having a real impact. The Regional Australia Institute has just released a report today that says our unemployment rate out in the regions is at 3.8%, the lowest in decades, and our job vacancies are skyrocketing. 70,000. We've got great long-term, well-paid careers right across the regions. Come and join us. Our key industries of agriculture and mining are booming, with the resource and energy export earnings forecast to hit a staggering $379 billion, with hundreds of projects in the pipeline. Ag has forecast to hit $73 billion and it's well on the way to its target of $100 billion by 2030. We've invested over $100 billion in infrastructure projects, in roads and rail, to better connect our rural communities and shift our product, not just to capital cities, but to ports and international markets. We've spent $3.5 billion on dams, pipelines and weirs because we know that we create wealth by adding water to our ingenuity.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Watt, the interjections are coming far too frequently. Interjections are always disorderly. Senator Mackenzie has a pretty powerful voice, and I could not hear parts of her answer. Senator Mackenzie, you have the call.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your protection. We've put $5 billion back into community for drought resilience, and we're tapping into emerging industries such as the hydrogen industry and putting $1.3 billion on the table for that. I could go on and on. We're putting record investment into the regions, but I tell you what, I would love to hear someone over the other side of this chamber talking about regional Australia. Albo didn't even mention it at his National Press Club speech last week.
Your time has expired. Senator Canavan, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's great news, Minister. Can the minister further advise how supporting regional and remote communities will strengthen Australia's future economic prosperity?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. We know that when the regions are strong, Australia is strong. A third of our population lives outside of capital cities, and a vast amount of our GDP is produced out there too. That's why we're investing in infrastructure, connectivity and resilience for the regions, not just building short-term impacts but for generations. Take the project like the Inland Rail. More than 400 Australian businesses have already shared in the billions of dollars we're investing in that project. The ARTC, for example, has over $140 million of contracts out there that are building jobs in places like Rockhampton and Wagga Wagga as they produce the concrete sleepers. We've expected to boost This project is going to boost our GDP by more than $18 billion over the next half a century. We've got a long-term vision for this country and for the regions. And it's also going to reduce our emissions by 750,000 tonnes, which is great news as we put more product on rail and off-road.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Canavan, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister outline the risks to Australia's economic security if our regions are not supported?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, there are very real risks and challenges to Australia's economic security if we don't back our farmers, our foresters, our miners, our fishers and our manufacturers. But the greatest risk is sitting opposite me right now. We know that Adam Bandt and Albo have done the sneaky deal, and Adam just could not wait for the election campaign to outline it. He couldn't wait.
Minister.
What are they going to do? A moratorium. A moratorium on all
Minister, please resume your seat.
I want to re-announce, Adam.
I would remind you that we need to address members of the other place by their correct titles. Minister, you have the call.
I will be respectful. Adam Bandt, he's sealing the deal with Albo and demanding Labor a moratorium till COP27, that's 4 years, 4 years on all new coal, gas and oil projects in support. That is going to kill hundreds of projects, tens of thousands of local jobs in places like the Hunter, in places like Western New South Wales and Central Queensland.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Senior Australians and Aged Care Services, Senator Colbeck. Does the minister think that $22 per hour is enough for aged care workers?
The Minister for Senior Australians, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. As I've said in this chamber before, and I've said on a number of occasions in front of your committee, the determination of the salary for people across Australia is a matter for Fair Work Australia. Which was actually legislated by the Labor Party, Mr President. It was legislated by the and so, Mr President, what I believe, Mr President, what I believe is that all Australians in the workforce, but particularly those working in aged care, should be fairly compensated. There is a case open right now, being considered by Fair Work Australia, in relation to the wages of Australians working in the aged care sector, Mr President. We have done, as we said we would do in response to the Royal Commission, provided support and advice to that case as it has progressed, Mr President. But, Mr President, Mr President, when Mr Albanese was asked about this a week or so ago, do you say that aged care workers should have a 25% pay rise? Do you agree with that, Mr President?
Minister. Senator Keneally on a point of order.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. Direct relevance. This was a fairly—
Sorry, I could not actually hear you, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr President. Point of order on relevance. This was a fairly tightly worded question. It had no embroidery. It was very direct. It was literally, does the minister believe the pay of $22 per hour is sufficient for aged care workers? It made no mention of anything about the industrial relations system or other parties in the parliament. It was a fairly tightly worded question. I ask you to bring the minister back to the lead.
Senator Keneally, I've been listening to the minister answer the question. I believe that his first part of the answer was relevant to the question. The minister was straying into other territory, so I have allowed you to bring the minister back to the question. I will listen carefully to his answer. Minister, you have 40 seconds remaining. You have the call.
Thank you, Mr President. And I have directly responded to the question, but it is pertinent that Mr Albanese, when asked about this, said it's up to the Fair Work Commission to determine what that figure will be. Now, they don't want to hear that, Mr President.
Order. Senator Pratt. Order. Senator Keneally.
Thank you, and I thank you for your previous comments about the minister straying from the question. Again, a point of order on direct relevance. He is straying again.
Senator Birmingham.
Yes, Mr President. Mr President, on the point of order. The question was about wage rates. The minister is absolutely within his rights to outline how wage rates are set and indeed to use direct quotes about the validity of the system that sets those wage rates. The minister was not making a political point from what I heard at the time Senator Keneally took her point of order. He was using a direct quote about the system that sets wage rates, which was entirely relevant to the context of the answer he was giving.
Senator Gallagher on the point of order.
On the point of order, Mr President, and following on from Senator Birmingham's comments, the minister was making a political point. He was quoting from a transcript about the Leader of the Opposition. And he was making a political point. It had no relevance at all, and it was ignoring.
Order.
It was ignoring the direction that you just provided to the minister. He completely ignored your direction.
On the point of order.
Yes, on the point of order, Mr President. Can I point out here that all the minister is doing is confirming how our wage system works by referring to someone who has been a member of this parliament for many years, Mr Albanese. The only implication you can take from the points by Senator Gallagher is she does not think that Mr Albanese is an authority about how our system works, that he does not know, apparently, how our system works, because all the minister is doing is quoting someone who probably knows how the system works. It's not a political point.
Resume your seat. I think we've all heard enough. I allowed you to direct the minister back to the question, as I believe there was a risk that he was straying from the direct topic. I continue to listen to the minister's answer. I will continue to listen. I am not yet convinced that the minister is not being relevant, but I am listening very carefully. Minister, you have the call for 31 seconds.
Thank you, Mr President. As I've said, I believe that all Australians in the workforce, particularly those in aged care, should be fairly remunerated.
Order.
The level of that remuneration should be determined by Fair Work Australia. That's what the government said, and that's exactly what Mr Albanese said. He agrees. So, Mr President, I believe that they should be fairly remunerated. I know they work hard. I appreciate how hard they work.
Your time has expired. Senator Gallagher.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr President. The opposition isn't asking about the tribunal's view. We are asking the minister responsible for aged care services and an aged care workforce whether you believe, as the minister responsible, that pay rates of $22 an hour is sufficient for aged care workers. You should answer that question and not avoid it.
Order. Order. Senator Abetz. I will not call the minister. I haven't got a mask on. I will not call the minister until there is silence. Senator Abetz. Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. I'll say it again. I think that all Australians in the workforce should be fairly remunerated. The balance of how that remuneration is established in relation to all other elements of the economy is rightly and properly determined by Fair Work Australia. That's why Fair Work Australia was set up. I presume that's why the Labor Party established Fair Work Australia. And whatever pay rise is granted to workers in the aged care sector, Mr Albanese agrees with the government that it's up to Fair Work Australia to decide. That's the process. Mr President, I believe they deserve a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, and they work hard, Mr President. They work extremely hard. I've acknowledged countless times in this chamber how hard they work. I've spoken to aged care workers, Mr President. And, Mr President, so I believe that they should be fairly recompensed, and, Mr President, I will continue to maintain that.
Senator, order. Senator Gallagher, second supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Does the minister believe that aged care workers are fairly remunerated now? And have you personally asked Mr Morrison to make a submission to the Fair Work Commission work value case in support of a wage rise for aged care workers? And you referred earlier to help and support provided by the government. Please outline what that help and support is.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. My understanding is that the advice that we've provided to Fair Work Australia has been published by Fair Work Australia. So Fair Work Australia wrote to the government, asked us to make some submissions in relation to this case. We have done that, and will provide any information that they seek, Mr President. There's one element that wasn't a matter for Fair Work Australia to determine, and we've advised them of that, and that was in relation to future budgeting. Mr President, and so we have and we will continue to provide the information that Fair Work Australia requires in the determination of this case, Mr President. The government has responded to the Royal Commission's recommendations, and we have said in response to the Royal Commission's recommendations that Fair Work Australia is the appropriate place for the determination of wages.
Please resume your seat. Senator Keneally on a point of order.
Direct relevance. The question also included, did the minister personally ask Mr Morrison to make a submission to the Fair Work Commission? With 13 seconds left, we'd appreciate if the minister could get to that part of the question.
A minister can be directly relevant to any part of the question. You have brought the minister's attention to a particular part of the question. Senator Colbeck, you have the call for 13 seconds unless you have finished your answer.
Thank you, Mr President. As Mr Albanese said, it's up to the Fair Work Commission what that figure should be. Fair Work Australia is the appropriate determiner of wages in this country. The government believes that's as well.
Senator Hughes, order. On my right and my left. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Women's Safety, Senator Ruston. Can the minister update the Senate on how the Liberal and Nationals government is ensuring support is available to victims of domestic, family and sexual violence through 1800 RESPECT into the future?
The Minister for Women's Safety, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Hughes for her question on this really important subject. 1800 RESPECT is the national gateway for all Australians who are seeking help or assistance who are affected by family, domestic and sexual violence. And it is an absolute priority of this government to ensure that we have this national telephone and online counselling service is of the absolute highest quality so that people who rely on it can rely on it. And that's why we conducted an open and a competitive procurement process to secure the next provider to deliver 1800 RESPECT into the future. So on the 24th of January this year, I was pleased to announce that Telstra Health had been the successful provider, and that was following a very extensive process that enabled us to come up with the strongest service solution and with the capability to provide a really high-quality response that was trauma-informed and fit for purpose. So Telstra Health will deliver 1800 RESPECT for the next 5 years with the possibility of an extension. This is the first time that we've put in place a 5-year contract for the service so that we can make sure that we have continuity and stability in the service that we provide, because we know it is so important to so many Australians. Through this process, we've overhauled the funding model. It is no longer a cost-per-contact model. It's one based on the time that's needed to help the person and to make sure that 1800 RESPECT is funded on the basis of the user need. As our understanding of trauma and the pervasive nature of gender-based violence continues to evolve, we are also ensuring that this service evolves to meet the diverse and complex needs of the people that rely on it. A staged transition will occur to make sure that there is no impact on the delivery when Telstra Health take up the service provision in July. And can I take this opportunity to acknowledge the work of Medibank Health Solutions and their subcontractors who have been delivering this important commitment since 2010.
Senator Hughes, a
Thank
supplementary
you, Mr.
question.
President. Can the minister outline the further improvements that are being made to 1800 RESPECT?
Minister.
A number of enhancements will be available into the future to ensure that 1800 RESPECT meets the needs of the diverse and complex needs of the people who rely on the service. New technology is one of the key things that are going to be built into the new platform, so additional options for users so that they can use text messages or video calls. And most importantly, there is a new mechanism which means that they can transfer between devices and platforms without needing to disconnect. Follow-up on referrals is also very important, which we will do when it is safe to do so, to ensure that the needs that the person has sought have been met in the appropriate way. The new service offering will also include supported referrals by counsellors to other appropriate supports within the broader service system. Importantly, we're acting on the advice from the sector to make sure these technological enhancements support a tell-it-once model to minimise the need for users to continually repeat their story.
Senator Hughes, a second supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, how is the government continuing to respond to the recommendations of the Respect at Work report through the additional support being provided by 1800 Respect?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, we all have a role to stopping sexual harassment and creating safe workplaces, and that's why we've ensured 1800 Respect expands its service offering to provide psychological support and referrals to people affected by workplace sexual harassment. Importantly, this particular enhancement responds to recommendation 54 of the Respect at Work report. Our government has agreed or noted to all 55 recommendations in the report, and our response is about creating a new culture of respectful behaviour in workplaces across the whole of Australia. It's also our priority to ensure that 1800 Respect provides high-quality and responsive support to people who need help and information, and it's important this includes victims of workplace sexual harassment. I'd like to take the opportunity to encourage anybody who has been impacted or knows someone who's been impacted by sexual assault or family violence to call 1800 Respect on 1800 737 732 or go to our website.
Senator Griff.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to Senator Hume, representing the Minister for Communications. 2 days ago, the government announced it would increase funding to the ABC, restore indexation and continue funding the enhanced news-gathering program for an additional 3 years. That program, which sits outside of the ABC's base funding, allows the ABC to employ journalists in regional Australia, particularly in areas which would otherwise go without local news. More than 70 people are currently employed by this program, and the continued funding shows the government believes it provides value for money. Could the minister explain why the government decided to keep this funding, the enhanced news-gathering funding, outside of ABC's base funding?
The Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Senator Hume.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Griff very much for his question and his enduring commitment to a strong and independent ABC, one that is shared by the government, and an ABC that provides quality broadcast services free of bias or political alignment and is reflective of our population and the values and expectations that all Australians have, as they are the ones who fund the ABC. Certainly the government recognises the importance of the ABC and understands that Australians also value the services provided by our ABC, and we're committed to a strong and resilient ABC, operating efficiently and delivering the best possible outcomes with the substantial funding that it receives. And in fact, the ABC has more funding certainty than any other media organisation in Australia. At the moment, taxpayers fund the ABC with more than $1 billion every single year, and this is a substantial investment of public funds in our national broadcaster to enable it to provide television, radio and digital media services in line with its charter. Mr President, the budget for the next 3 years of ABC funding, commencing on the 1st of July 2022, was announced, as Senator Griff said, on the 7th of February this year. The ABC will receive $3.3 billion over the next 3 years to the 30th of June 2025. And as Senator Griff points out, this includes $45.8 million under the new enhanced news gathering program to strengthen local public interest journalism in regional communities. Mr President, this represents an increase in funding compared to both the 2016 to 19 triennium and the 2019 to 2022 triennium. And the ABC will also receive indexation on that base operational funding, which does not include the $45.8 million under the Enhanced News Gathering Program. The ABC will also, however, receive funding to continue and to expand audio description services to blind and vision impaired.
Your time has expired. Senator Griff, a supplementary question.
Minister, you didn't directly answer my question, which related to why enhanced news gathering is kept outside of the ABC's core budget. Now, some have claimed the government keeps it outside as a way of keeping the broadcaster dependent and compliant. Could you rebut this by explaining the other components, perhaps even on notice, of ABC funding which sit outside the base funding, if there are any?
Minister.
Senator Griff, I doubt that anyone in this chamber would call the ABC compliant or dependent. In fact, the ABC were delighted with the government's decision to commit $3.3 billion over the next 3 years, and that was a direct quote from the chair of the ABC, Ita Buttrose. In fact, she said that that funding agreement will allow the national broadcaster to continue what it does best, to provide information and entertainment to Australians wherever they live. And in fact, David Anderson, the Managing Director of the ABC, welcomed the funding certainty that the announcement brings to the national broadcaster for the next 3 years. He said that the triennial funding announcement is an important recognition that the ABC is needed now more than ever, and that this funding is required so that it can continue to fulfil its vital role in our democratic society. He even reached out and thanked Minister Paul Fletcher and the government for recognising the enduring value of the ABC, particularly in this year as they mark 90 years of serving all Australians.
Senator Griff, a second supplementary.
Minister, journalists employed under the Enhanced News Gathering Program cannot be offered contracts which run beyond the funding period. That is a fact. As their employment and financial circumstances are precarious, the ABC struggles to attract and retain quality journalists in regional areas. What would the minister say to these journalists to justify this policy of keeping it outside of the core budget?
Minister.
The ABC's funding is more certain than any other news-gathering organisation in Australia, than any other media organisation in Australia. And in fact, the News Media Bargaining Code, which of course passed this chamber on the 25th of February 2021, implemented that News, Media and Digital Platforms Mandatory Bargaining Code, which has allowed the ABC to reach an agreement—
Sorry, Minister. Senator Griff, on a point of order.
Look, direct relevance. My question solely related to enhanced news gathering budget being outside of the core ABC budget.
I'm listening to the minister's answer. I don't believe I can yet bring her back to the question. You have brought her back to part of the question, but Minister, you have the call. You have 36 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Griff, what I wanted to say was that the enhanced mandatory bargaining code, the Media and Digital Platforms Mandatory Bargaining Code, and the commercial agreements that have been now negotiated between Google and Meta and the ABC have now allowed the ABC, and they have publicly committed to this, to use any of those funds from those agreements to support regional journalism specifically. And on the 5th of November 2021, the ABC unveiled plans for major investment in regional and rural broadcasting, regional and rural journalism, using those proceeds from its agreement with Google
Minister,
Showcase.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Davey.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Industry, Energy and Emissions Reduction, Senator Seselja. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the Liberal and Nationals in government are securing our energy future, including and especially in regional Australia?
The Minister representing the Minister for Industry. Order. Order. I will call the Minister again. The Minister representing the Minister for Industry, Senator Seselja.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And we're already getting the interjections, which I love, from Senator Watt. But these are the facts. These are the facts. Electricity costs are now at their lowest level in 8 years. In the last 2 years alone, energy costs for households are down 8% and costs for small businesses are down 10%. Our reforms to cap the price of the highest cost electricity deals mean that a typical household can be up to $768 a year better off, and a typical small business up to $3,000 a year better off. Now, on top of this, an AEMC report released in November shows household electricity bills across the national electricity market will continue to fall by a further nearly 6% on average over the next few years. Now, that's in stark contrast to when that lot were in government, where we saw 23 consecutive quarters of increases in electricity prices. And now what do we see from those opposite? Labor are flip-flopping on the Curry project in the Hunter. This project will provide 600 direct construction jobs, 1,200 indirect jobs for the Hunter region.
Order.
And now, after nearly a year of talking down jobs and investment in the Hunter, after 9 of his frontbench colleagues opposed the project, the weak Leader of the Opposition, each way elbow, has backflipped on support for a new gas-fired power station in Curry. What a conviction politician he is.
I have someone on their feet on a point of order, I believe. I was going to bring the minister's attention to the fact we do need to refer to members of the other place by their correct titles. Minister, you have the call.
Conviction politician the Leader of the Opposition is. Now, what do we think some senators over there think about this change of heart? Well, we know Senator Keneally and McAllister, they created LEAN, the Labor Environmental Action Organisation, which said we know increasing gas supply is not the solution. It's not good for the economy. It's not good for jobs, and it's not good for the environment. So much support for Anthony Albanese and his new policy over there on the opposition benches. Senator McAllister, Senator Keneally and the entire frontbench team.
Minister,
nobody believes
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Davey.
Thank you, Minister. You've mentioned the Curry project in Hunter. Can you explain again, for the benefit, particularly for the benefit of those opposite who may still be wavering despite Labor's backflip, why that project, the Hunter Power project, is so important?
Minister.
Thank you, and yes, I can, because closing the Liddell power plant without adequate replacement capacity risks prices rising by around 30% over 2 years, which is what happened when they were last in government. That's why now, more than ever, it's important to see Curry come online, a project that on this side we've consistently supported. But the Leader of the Opposition said the project doesn't stack up. Senator McAllister said if you're interested in driving down electricity prices, you'd be mad to use gas. Chris Bowen said we don't support new gas-fired power stations like Curry. Pat Conroy said it's a massive white elephant. Mark Butler said we know that coal and gas won't underpin continued prosperity. And Mark Dreyfus said it's a project that no one wants. That's what they really believe. That is what the Labor Party really believe. Forget about what they're saying now, just before an election, in a desperate bid to curry favour with those in the Hunter and elsewhere. They can't be trusted. We've got them in their own words.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Davey, a second supplementary.
Thank you. Finally,
Senator
Minister.
Davey, hold on. Let's just have some quiet before you start the question. Okay, Senator Davey, you have the call.
Thank you. Can the minister outline what the risks are to the continued delivery of affordable and reliable energy for all Australian families and all Australian small and to medium businesses?
Minister.
Well, I can, and of course it's those opposite, in potential coalition with the Greens. In coalition with the Greens. And here in the ACT, we've had a bit of a look at what that looks like, a Labor-Greens coalition, and Anthony Albanese and Adam Bandt want to take that project national. That's what they want to do. They want to take it national. And what have we seen here? Well, electricity prices in the rest of the country, they're going down. What we're seeing in the ACT is they're projected to go up by 4% on the back of a 12% increase just last year. And of course, if Anthony Albanese is going to cave to the Greens on energy policy, they really don't like me talking about their Labor-Greens alliance. All right.
Yep, Minister. I've just seated the minister. Senator Billick.
Once again, Mr President, I will draw your attention to the fact that the Speaker is not referring to the gentleman he's referring to by the right title or name.
I will ask everyone to remember that we address members of the other place by their correct titles. Minister, You have the call.
And so if the Leader of the Opposition is going to cave to the Greens on energy, what else is he going to give the Greens, we ask? Is he going to cave to them in their policy to cut defence spending in half? Is he going to cave to their policies to decriminalise hard drugs like ice? He will cave to them on anything to get in government, and that's why he can't be trusted.
Your time has expired. Senator Thorpe. Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs. In my home state of Victoria, people who sought the help of this country are being imprisoned in the Park Hotel. How can you justify locking these innocent people up for up to 9 years, where the vast majority of them have been recognised as refugees?
The Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Cash.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Thorpe for the question. Senator Thorpe, there is one thing that the Australian Greens and the Morrison-Joyce government disagree about, and that is in relation to the fundamental policy of border protection. You joined last time with the Labor Party, and as a result, the people that you are referring to in the alternative places of detention, they came to this country and they came here in contravention of our strong border protection laws. I reject any statement by you that in any way infers that they are locked up. We have made it very, very clear as a government that the fundamental responsibility of a government is the protection of Australia and Australians. And, Mr President, the question asked by Senator Thorpe is a very, very telling one. A very, very telling one, because what it says is this to the Australian people. If at the next election they were to cast a vote, as Senator Seselja has said, for the Australian Labor Party, they will be governing in concert, just like they did last time, with the Australian Greens. 50,000 people coming to this country illegally. The thousands of deaths, Senator Thorpe, of people at sea. We make no apologies on this side of the chamber, Mr President, for our tough border protection principles. A fundamental responsibility of any Commonwealth government must be the protection of Australia and Australians, and on that regard, both the Australian Greens and the Australian Labor Party, they fail every time.
Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, President.
Sorry, Senator Thorpe, that wasn't directed at you. That was directed at others. You have the call for your supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you, Minister, for your response. The only people who came here illegally were the people that came here 240 years on the boats. So, last month the Prime Minister claimed that the people held in the Park Hotel are not refugees. Why did the Prime Minister lie about this?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. And Senator Thorpe, I completely, totally and utterly reject the statement that you have made that the Prime Minister has lied. There is one thing that you can say about— there are many things that you can say about the Prime Minister, but this is a man who is responsible for, when the Minister for Immigration, some of the strongest border protection policies this country will ever see. And, Mr President, as we move towards the next election, which, as we know, is in but a few months, again, this question highlights the fundamental difference for all Australians of the attitude of the Australian Greens in coalition with the Australian Labor Party and the attitude of the coalition government. Again, we will never make excuses for protecting Australia and Australians.
Senator Thorpe, a second supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you, Minister, for your response. Again, the only people who came here legally were the people who came here 240 years ago on boats. What is the plan to release the remaining people who are being locked up and tortured at the Park Hotel prison.
Minister.
Mr President, I don't think there is a lot more that I can actually add to my answers because, again, Senator Thorpe, you actually show your disrespect for border protection policy in Australia by those comments. Governments are not torturing people, and any allegation that they are, as you know, is completely, totally and utterly untrue.
Order. Senator Patrick.
Don't agree with torture.
My question is to the Leader of the Government in the Senate. I first called on the Government to consider the establishment of a Royal Commission inquiry into Australia's COVID-19 pandemic response more than 7 months ago. Would you now agree that it's imperative that a fully independent national inquiry able to identify all lessons to be learned and able to deliver authoritative findings to guide future policy is required? Will the Government, before the pre-election caretaker period, commit to establishing a wide-ranging Royal Commission inquiry, fully empowered under the Royal Commission Act, to inquire into federal, state and territory government responses to the pandemic so that investigations can get underway by the middle of the year? If the Government is not prepared to do that now, will you commit to doing so after the election if you get into power?
The Leader of the Government in the Senate, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President, and I thank Senator Patrick for his question and Senator Abetz for his interjection before. Mr President, the Government continues, as we've acknowledged along the way, to manage the complicated responses to COVID-19. And those responses are complicated by the fact that it continues to be an evolving and changing situation. Had indeed, for example, a Royal Commission of the nature that Senator Patrick proposes delivered interim reports and findings ahead of the Omicron variant becoming established and becoming the dominant variant, it would probably have different recommendations at that stage to what it would have today, because that is the nature of the changing circumstance we face in handling a pandemic. And there will probably be other changes to come. We have certainly subjected ourselves to review and scrutiny throughout our responses to the pandemic, the committee that Senator Gallagher chairs being an important vehicle of that, along with the fact that all of the other mechanisms of scrutiny have continued to be in place. I have no doubt that there will be reviews when we are able to put the pandemic more squarely in the rearview mirror, and that those reviews will need to entail a cooperative approach between the Commonwealth, states and territories around how we best prepare ourselves for future uncertainty and future disasters. But I would underline, Senator Patrick, the word uncertainty in that regard, that the next major global disruption we face will almost unquestionably not be like the current one, and that whilst there are lessons that we should continue to learn from this, I don't think anybody should pretend that a Royal Commission or any other particular inquiry will be a panacea to answer all questions for the future.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Patrick, a supplementary question.
Thank you. I'll take that as a no. Would you agree that any future inquiries into the Government's COVID-19 pandemic response, whether it be a Royal Commission or other forms of inquiry, will require full, unrestricted access to the records of the Commonwealth departments and agencies? Accordingly, will the Government direct the Director-General of Archives to immediately issue, under the Archives Act, a records retention notice to all departments and agencies prohibiting them from destroying Commonwealth records or hard copies of documents relating to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sorry, Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, whilst I don't pretend to be an expert on the legalities of the Archives Act and the obligations that exist across Commonwealth agencies, I am fairly confident to say that they are not destroying records or documents that would be appropriately considered under any future review or other arrangements. If there's a need to add to that in terms of the request you have made, or the suggestion you have made, Senator Patrick, about an explicit order being made, and whether that would provide any additional protection in that regard. I'll bring further information to the chamber if that is necessary. In terms of cooperation, if an inquiry is established, and as I said, I expect there will be not only plenty of reviews, but obviously there will be many academic studies focusing on particular areas, all different areas of response to the pandemic over the years to come, and certainly where there are reviews of government, we will cooperate fully.
Minister. Thank you, Minister. Senator Patrick, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. After 3 years, the government has failed to deliver a promised federal anti-corruption commission. What guarantees can you give that if re-elected, that you won't continue to duck scrutiny and accountability for the failures of the government's COVID-19 response, for the failure of border control and quarantine, the vaccine stroll-out, the RATS test kit shambles and the continuing tragedy in our aged care homes? Aren't those failures the reason why you won't support a Royal Commission?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, I completely reject the many assertions that Senator Patrick has made in his question. If we were to have the type of fair income independent inquiry that Senator Patrick wants to speak of, and it were to do a global comparison, I am confident it would find that in Australia the fatality rates are some of the lowest in the world. The vaccination rates are some of the highest in the world. The employment outcomes and business security and safety and survival rates are some of the best in the world. Now, Mr President, as I have acknowledged, the Prime Minister has acknowledged, as Senator Colbeck and Minister Hunt have acknowledged, have we got absolutely everything right in a period of enormous global uncertainty? No, we don't pretend that we have. And those rearview mirror experts opposite, who are experts in hindsight, who of course pretend that they would have got everything right, there's no chance that they would have, nor has any other government around the world got everything right. But we have done very well in Australia relative to many other countries, and we continue to respond as comprehensively as we can to—
Minister. Senator Watt.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Senior Australians and Aged Care Services, Senator Colbeck. In March last year, a report from this minister's own aged care regulator warned that the Jeddah Gardens nursing home was not prepared for a COVID-19 outbreak and, I quote, had not minimised infection-related risks as it had not effectively planned or prepared for a potential outbreak of COVID-19. What action did this minister take in response?
Minister for Senior Australians and Aged Care Services, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. The government, through the regulator, issued a number of notices to the provider and continued to work with the provider and a number of follow-up visits to ensure that the provider did bring its response up to an appropriate level of standard. It took regulatory action, Mr President, in September. It put a non-compliance notice in October, and on the 29th of November put a notice to remedy, Mr President. So the Quality and Safety Commission actually undertook its role, which is continue to provide oversight to the provider, Mr President, to bring the service back to compliance, Mr President. And it continues to do that, Mr President, and it continues to do that. That is the role that the Quality and Safety Commission has, Mr President. It has that independent legislative responsibility that the Labor Party voted for to provide that level of oversight to a provider and take appropriate compliance action to bring a service back into compliance, Mr President. And of course, the government has provided significant additional resources to the Quality and Safety Commission to ensure that they have the capacity to do that, Mr President. And that's what we will continue to do. We'll continue to work to improve the structure of the system, the resources of the system, particularly the Quality and Safety Commission, so that they can provide the relevant and appropriate oversight to the sector to ensure that all providers, Mr President, are in compliance. And, Mr President, I will say this to any provider out there. be prepared for the fact that even though there is a pandemic on, the Quality and Safety Commission will continue to be focused on its work as it appropriately should.
Senator Watt, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. The minister claims that Jeddah Gardens was brought back to compliance, but yesterday reports emerged that chronic staff shortages at Jeddah Gardens have forced 90-year-old residents to care for each other, that families were lied to about vaccinations and not informed their loved ones had COVID until they were dying, and that staff were asked to only change masks if you need to due to mask shortages. How could the minister fail Jeddah Gardens residents so badly when he was twice warned that their safety was at risk?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you, Mr President, and I too have seen those reports. And Mr President, that is why, Mr President, additional quality regulatory action has been taken against the provider, including a notice to agree, which has required additional capacity to be employed by the facility to ensure that it is providing services to the residents there in accordance with the quality standards, Mr President. That is the role of the system, that is the role of the Quality and Safety Commissioner, and that's what the Commission has done, Mr President. Mr President, I have to say I, like so many others, Mr President, am extremely disappointed in the non-compliance of this service, Mr President. They need to take responsibility for their role as an approved provider, Mr President, and I will ensure that the Quality Commission does its role as an oversight.
Your time has expired. Senator Watt, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. With 15 Jeddah Gardens residents now tragically dead from COVID-19, after this minister was twice warned their safety was at risk, and 182 residents and staff infected with COVID, does the minister still seriously believe the aged care system is not in crisis?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. As I've said a number of times this week, the aged care sector in Australia, due to COVID-19, due to a global pandemic, is under severe stress. And nobody, Mr President, Mr President, has tried to deny that, Mr President. And we have provided every single resource that we possibly can. And, Mr President, I know that different people, and I'm not here to play word bingo with the Labor Party. I'm here to work with the aged care sector to resolve the issues and to assist them to work their way through the pandemic. While we work on the pandemic, Mr President, the Labor Party play politics with the pandemic. That's what they do. They are playing politics with the pandemic, and we are actively in action in working on assisting the sector to get to work its way through the pandemic, providing them with the resources, whether it's surge workforce, whether it's PPE, whether it's rapid antigen tests, all of those things, Mr President, to support the sector to get through the pandemic.
Minister. Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash. Can the minister update the Senate on how the Liberal and Nationals government's plan is securing Australia's pipeline of skilled workers now and into the future?
The Minister representing the Minister for Employment, Senator Cash.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator O'Sullivan for his question. And in particular, I acknowledge all the work that he did prior to becoming a senator in relation to ensuring that Australians are upskilled, and in particular in our home state of Western Australia. Mr President, the Morrison-Joyce government, without a doubt, is a job-creating government. Since we were elected in 2013, over 1.7 million jobs have now been created. For context, we actually have had a population the size of South Australia, move into work over the last 9 years. That is a great thing for the Australian people. The unemployment level, as we know, now sits at 4.2%. It is now lower than when Labor was last in office. And of course, getting Australians into jobs is the focus of our policies when it comes to recovering from COVID-19. And Senator O'Sullivan, as you know, one of those focuses is investing in vocational education and training. Mr President, Our investment in skills and training commenced when we were elected to office in 2013. It is now at record levels in Australia. In the past 2 years, the coalition government has invested around $12 billion into the skills and training system, and this year alone we're expecting a record $7.1 billion investment. And as we know, Mr President, as we move towards the election, it's important to remind ourselves what Labor did to vocational education and training when they were last in office. Because if you recall, they totally destroyed the reputation of the vet sector. Colleagues, who can forget Labor's disastrous vet fee help system, signing up students to courses that didn't exist and now costing the Australian taxpayer $2 billion in recrediting?
Senator O'Sullivan, a supplementary question.
Mr President, I thank the minister for that answer. How has the government's plan for schools helped businesses take on more apprentices and to keep them on?
Minister.
Mr President, a number of the policies that we have put in place throughout COVID-19 have well and truly assisted businesses not just to take on more apprentices, but to keep those apprentices that they have taken on. In terms of our boosting apprenticeship commencement wage subsidy, it has been an overwhelming success. The wage subsidy has put almost 277,000 Australians into an apprenticeship or traineeship, and that's in over 82,000 businesses. Mr President, for those 277,000 Australians, what a fantastic step up for them into their new job. And of course, for those 82,000 businesses, to have that government investment in those apprentices and trainees has well and truly been reflected in the fact that the 277,000 are now in apprenticeships or traineeships. And, Mr President, during the pandemic, about 38% of businesses have increased the number of apprentices that they have.
Your time has expired. Senator O'Sullivan, a second supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. How is the government working with states and territories to address their unique challenges in skills demand?
Minister.
Mr President, throughout COVID-19 we have worked with the states and territories, and in particular in relation to the skilled workforce and delivering the skilled workforce that Australia needs. You will recall that we set up the Job Trainer Fund. This was a jointly funded between the states and the territories and the Commonwealth Government. It was a $2 billion job trainer program supporting over 400,000 free or low-cost training places in areas of demand. And, Mr President, the key here was working with the states and territories to ensure that the investment that we were making together properly reflected the demand in the workplace. So the courses that you see that are offered by the individual states and territories, when people sign up to those free or low-cost courses, they know that the Morrison-Joyce government is supporting them into being upskilled in an area in which the labour market is saying you will get a job.
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.